I'm Jean Feinstone. I head communications for the Business Call to Action, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to BCTA's 6th Annual Forum on Inclusive Business. We have a very full agenda, but before we begin, just a couple of quick notes. Please be sure to spend some time in the expo, which was just as you entered off the elevator. Our new members and other members are exhibiting their programs there. You'll have a chance to ask them about more details. Of course, we encourage you to tweet. There's information up here. Please share this with your networks. And of course, you'll find refreshments in the back of the room throughout the day. Now it's my honor to introduce Magdy Martínez-Solimán, the UN Development Program's Assistant Administrator and Director of the Bureau for Policy and Program Support, which hosts BCTA.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you to the Business Call to Action's 6th Annual Forum. It is a pleasure to see many colleagues and partners here with us this morning. As you probably know, Business Call to Action came to life through a partnership between the Netherlands, the UK, Sweden, the United States, Finland, and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, which hosts the Secretariat, as our Master of Ceremonies just mentioned. The partners and more gather here today as we celebrate the 70th milestone of the founding of the United Nations, and as the global community is about to embark in what Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has rightly referred to as, and I quote, a universal, transformative and integrated agenda that heralds a historic turning point for our world. Transforming our world is the name of the agenda. Not anymore post-2015, the 2030 agenda, looking at the horizon more than at the hurdle to pass, and that is exactly what the 17 Sustainable Development Goals aim to do. The SDGs are intended to tackle key and tough bottlenecks to sustainable development, such as poverty, of course, inequalities, unsustainable consumption and production patterns, inadequate infrastructure, and lack of decent jobs, amongst many others. Achieving the ambitious goals will be neither simple nor cheap. According to best estimates from the UN Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, between 3.3 and 4.5 trillion every year in state spending, investment and aid will be needed to meet these goals. If you think that aid, only aid, is plateauing at 150 billion at best, on the best given year, you immediately realize how wide the gap is. But one has to also qualify a statement like that. These are expenditures on ourselves, on our societies, on our infrastructure, on our economy, on our education, on our healthcare, on our elders, on our children, on our people and on our planet, as the tagline goes, and certainly on our present and on our future. Good things to spend money on, if it were. There is no question that all sources of finance, public and private, domestic and international, will have a central role to play in supporting the post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda. One source of finance does not and should not substitute for another, but complement another. A partnership comprised of all stakeholders, governments, the private sector, development partners, multilateral banks and international financial institutions, research platforms and civil society organizations will be needed to ensure sufficient funding for the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Public finance matters and is, of course, central, but the majority of the resources needed to finance the new SDGs will come from the private sector. Governments can regulate how much highway is needed, can even draw the map, but at the end, somebody needs to build it. Our challenge is to ensure that as much of this finance as possible, as much of private flows as possible, are aligned with and support the Sustainable Development Goals. And for that, incentives are key. We have seen major increases in the private sector's interest and involvement in development over recent years. This includes a rise in socially responsible investing, which in the US alone has grown from slightly below 0.7 trillion in the mid-90s to 3.7 trillion by 2012. And in philanthropic giving, expanded corporate social responsibility initiatives and the implementation of voluntary principles around responsible investing. This is a very, very welcome change, as the private sector needs to be part of sustainable development solutions, is actually part in its most enlightened and far-reaching sectors, notwithstanding some news we read about the automobile industry in the last hours. But we need more. We have seen that rapid growth and improved standards of living in developing countries are creating demand for goods and services by people living at the bottom of the base, whose collective purchasing power exceeds $5 trillion US. So the question is, how do we fully unleash the economic power of the private sector to realize the SDGs, and how do we connect these people who do have a purchasing power to the markets? Expanding inclusive business is one way in which we can enhance the role of the private sector in sustainable development. Inclusive business approaches go beyond CSR, beyond philanthropy, and beyond impact investment by, as I just mentioned, connecting poor people to markets. They encompass business approaches that directly improve the lives of the poor by making them part of the value chains of companies' core businesses as suppliers, as distributors, as retailers, or as customers. The world's multilateral development banks have invested over $15 billion in inclusive business approaches, and private investors have raised $6 billion more in funds for businesses with not only commercial viability, but also explicit social objectives. Let me look quickly at the energy sector to bring an example to you and to the role it plays in development. We all know that access to reliable energy, to clean energy, can have a transformative effect on poor people's lives. On the other hand, not having access to electricity is one of the identifications of poverty in this world. Dirty energy is also a way in which poor people have to carry on difficult lives. Access to energy provides lighting after dark, clean cooking, heating in cold homes, charging for mobile communications, power for small health clinics and machines, faster processing of food and textiles, income-generating opportunities, and the ability for students to study and do their homework. It also allows water to flow without so much effort, especially for women and girls. Yet, in spite of what we know, more than 1.4 billion people, 18% of the global population, continue living without access to electricity. And nearly 3 billion, 40% of the global population, rely on biomass for their cooking needs, with what it means in terms of impact on their health and on the forests that are nearby to where they live. Access to modern energy services is therefore a vast, unmet need that underpins many development challenges, as well as a huge business opportunity. Businesses have the power to address these development needs, and inclusive business offer strong examples of how that power supports sustainable development. I could find other examples of how inclusive businesses are meeting this need in two of the Business Call to Action's newest members. Ilu Mexico has committed to bringing their solar home systems to 50,000 off-the-grid rural homes within Mexico, approximately 300,000 people, by 2020. Its commitment also includes the creation of new jobs in rural communities in Mexico. Similarly, new Business Call to Action member Onergy will scale up its operations, deploying a range of innovative, customized solar solutions, including for irrigation, cold storage, and computers for education, to communities in East India, among the country's poorest and least developed. This expansion is projected to impact 1 million lives while reducing CO2 emissions by 100,000 tons by 2017, the day after tomorrow. These are but two examples, and there are many more. New business call to action member companies alone have made commitments to 10 of the 17 SDGs. These include commitment to SDG 2 to help 5.4 million farmers experience better agricultural yields, to SDG 3 to ensure health and promote well-being for 100 million people and more, to SDG 5 to achieve gender equality and empowerment of women for 3.2 million of them through increased productivity and revenue generating activities, and SDG 8 by creating a number of full-time jobs. Inclusive businesses tend to be active in sectors where the poor are already engaged, such as agriculture, or in sectors that supply the poor, such as health, education, energy, housing, financial services, through financial inclusion, and water and sanitation. So in essence, inclusive business is a strategic multilateral development system and is indeed the perfect partner for states, for governments, for public administrations. However, companies cannot advance inclusive business alone. They need support from many stakeholders, which brings us back to the importance of partnerships in realizing this new global development agenda. Turkey's vibrant and growing private sector, comprised of a number of emerging multinational corporations, reflects both the importance of partnerships and the power of inclusive business, which is why, as president of the G20 this year, Turkey has committed to advancing the inclusive business agenda with UNDP, with the World Bank Group, and especially the International Finance Corporation, with active engagement by Business Call to Action, who have done a solid work in developing the G20 inclusive business framework. Let me conclude by saying that development means business. Good development has always been smart economics. The contrary would be nonsense. It is time to come back to the basis of what sustainable development really means. As we see during today's forum, development can be an excellent economic opportunity first and foremost for hardworking people, for hardworking companies, for hardworking families, women and youth, and also for businesses, corporations and enterprises, large and small, international and domestic, who employ them, who integrate them in their value chain, and who make them become part of a larger, more inclusive market economy. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the program today.